Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today is Chris Rossini, our co-host. Chris, welcome to the program.
It's great to be with you, Dr. Paul.
Very, very good. You know, we're going to be talking in a little bit with our regular program, and we want to talk about and emphasize, the cruelty of the whole system of justice. They promote these ideas about equal justice and social justice. It sounds real good, but we have a different opinion of how wonderful social justice is. Maybe the goals are okay. But before I do, I want to acknowledge our partnership with Birch Gold, because they've been working with us now, I imagine, for a year or so, and it's been good for both of us. So they have offered, and I've mentioned this before, and you might be inclined right now because gold is always going to be important, that they have some information that if you call and text a number, they will send you some free information about some of their opinions about gold. And how to text that is text Ron Paul 989898. And they will send you some material, and there's no charge for it, and it's up to you on whether you follow up on it. But I want to remind you about that because I think it's worthwhile. How can it go wrong if you can get some information that you don't have to pay for and you have no obligation, but it might give you some ideas about investment in gold, because there are a lot of different ways you invest in gold. I don't always use the word invest in gold, but you can invest in stocks and different things. But it is protection, really, is the way I've been looking at it over the years, because we all believe and understand, and most everybody that listens to our program understands the foolhardiness of our monetary system today, and they're looking for ways to try to protect against the abuse that we have to endure from our government. But today, Chris, we want to go ahead and talk a little bit about social justice movement and what's going on. And the more I looked into it, the worse I feel, the worse I felt, because it's just so, it's sort of an extension or the right arm of wokeism. But what struck me the most, which won't surprise many people because most of our viewers will already know it, it's all based on lies. But people want social justice, justice before the law. Every night you hear that. We have to have equal justice, fair justice before the law. And the rhetoric sounds pretty good, but there are people who, they might say that, then they give you this whole idea about the social justice movement, what we have to do, the regulations, and how we can protect the people against falsehoods. But I think the emphasis lately has been, more concerned about how many lies do the government tell us. And so many of us now has come to a conclusion they don't tell the truth very often, So you have to be skeptical. I read the other day something where the Russian people, the Soviets in the Soviet system, never believed anything the government told. And because they had lived with it, they knew it was nothing that worthwhile. But they said how it differed from Americans. Americans believe everything the government tells them. Well, maybe so, but I don't believe that's true of our audience. And I think the shift is coming, because look how many people went into the lockdowns and that COVID nonsense. It still lingers, and they still use the tools of authoritarianism to do that. So it is there. And of course, what we'd like to emphasize is that be cautious when it comes to working with the government, because a lot of people lie. And I keep thinking of an analogy of this recent election, because there was a new member of Congress, George Santos, who it discovered he got elected, and they said he lied on his resume. So he's the arch criminal in Washington. Everybody knows him, so I think if everybody knows you can't have a handshake and expect him to do it, there's enough suspicion that you'd be careful. So he's in a way harmless. But what about all the rest of them in Washington? Because they're the ones who, boy, they're anxious. Let's get rid of this guy. He told a lie. And yet well, that comes in contrast to many of us think that that's what the government does. They tell lies, whether they're economics or whether it's COVID or whether it's getting us involved in Ukraine, whether it's fighting the Middle East, whether it's going to war in Vietnam, and all these things, all based on lies. And if you want to compare the two, Santos isn't a threat to me as much as the people who are in our national security programs. Like FBI and CIA. I mean, the CIA is involved in most of the coups around the world, and they promote these causes. And the FBI. What about the confidence that we have about the election, bringing people in and, I'm for equal justice under the law, and then they give these movements wokeism, and all of a sudden we find out that the biggest big picture I can see on this, Chris, is the fact that we thought they buried, or we hoped they had buried Marxism with the total failure of the Soviet Marxist system. And they had a big setback. I mean, the Soviet system collapsed, which means that that was not a functional system. But they never quit. Now they've come back, and the Marxist system was mostly economics, control of the people, and sort of like we did with COVID, So they came back, but this the system going today is, and I think the name of it is proper, and that's cultural Marxism. They're going with culture, society, the environment, and all these wonderful things, but they call it cultural Marxism. But both of them are the same. They're authoritarian, and they can only be operated at the expense of liberty, and that is why we come out very strongly against what's going on in this country today under the name of social justice.
Very good, Dr. Paul. And bad ideas like Marxism, like fascism, they're like viruses. You think you defeat them, but then they mutate, and then you have to defeat them again. And that's how it's going to be in our lives, in your lives of viewers. Whatever we push back for a while, we'll be back under a different name, but it'll be the same thing, with a different wrapper. And that's, when we think about this cultural stuff, that's what we're dealing with. People are not treated as individuals, but as groups. And everybody has their own interests, their own cause. You could be in multiple groups where you're the oppressed on one hand and you're the oppressor on another hand. So which one are you? It's very illogical, but the whole thing is about power. The battle is to become the class of people, the group of people that gains in control of the state, of the levers and power, and then you get privileges for yourself. You force privileges for yourself. And most people want nothing to do with this. But you end up paying the costs for this group, and you're not supposed to say this, you're not supposed to do that, and you're supposed to do this, and you're supposed to do that. That's so it turns society into very disharmonious. And as Dr. Paul mentioned, corporations got involved with this, which was so stupid, because many of us were questioning, what do they want to lose money? And they did lose money. They're losing. Anybody that gets involved with this, so a lot of them are starting to turn around and distance themselves, or at least they're not as gung-ho as they used to be. But yeah, it should be. We're individuals, equal under the law. As of this moment, we got a ways to go to get to that.
Very, very good. And it is rampant now, this whole idea of social justice, who wants to be against that. But I think the ice is breaking and more people are waking up. I want to just go down a little list I have here of what has been involved in this system. It isn't just one thing, that they're going to work on, like education or something. It's pervasive. It's on everything. And these are some of the things that people accept and they're promoted, especially the progressives and the Democrats. They do this deliberately because of their basic philosophy that they don't have. So many of them reject the whole notion of a higher law, and so many of them believe that you can't know the truth. I think that really is the basis of all this nonsense. If you can't know the truth, But everybody knows that it's a very natural thing to know who's the boss then, who's going to guide people, where's the morality coming from. And once you destroy the principle that you can't know the truth, I'll tell you what, there's a lot of people who like to fill that role. You know, you take people like Bill Gates and Fauci and these other people that ruin the system, and then they come in and fill in. They are the dictators, and they will fulfill this role. And we don't want to hear any nonsense about natural law. You mean naturally you can figure out what is right and wrong? Oh no, you can't do that. It's impossible to know right and wrong. It's too confusing, and that's why you need elite people. And they actually brag about this. The woke people, they believe that they have to be the people who will straighten this whole thing out. But let me go down a couple things that comes out of this nonsense and these beliefs. Well, the whole idea of the cancel culture. This is part of it. You know, we're going to control the First Amendment. We know what's right, and we can deliver a truthful message, and you can't know the truth, so you need us to do it. And then if you don't, we're going to punish you. And that, of course, came out tremendously on the magnification of what they did with the danger of COVID, which was a terrible, terrible thing to do to the principles of liberty. And I think each one of these things I'm going to mention is at the sacrifice of liberty. You know, you say you have a cancel culture. Well, you have to say you have to sacrifice the First Amendment, but that's okay. We'll help you on that. And then they'll sell this on. Well, if you don't do what we tell you, you're a racist. Well, I am convinced as long as I was in Washington, the more I came around to agreeing or believing and understanding the individuals there. And the ones who were the most anti-race, they were against this racism stuff going on, were the most racist themselves. And it's sort of their cover, and then the people who disagree, they have to first convince them that they're not racist, and they go on. But the whole thing is that the true racists are the ones who talk about it the most. There's this virtue signaling. This is insane. They have to just show they're good people, and they send these signals, and everybody knows what you're supposed to do, except now more people are catching on. Get away from us. I'm sick and tired of hearing this nonsense that you're so virtuous. And if they're against all these things, they still want to present themselves, so they're virtuous people, and we're going to save the world. We're going to save the environment, and you people are heathens, and you're going to destroy the environment. So it's all based on lies. This is why I fear these lies more than I wore George Santos. I think he is harmless, like I said. But these people are doing real harm. Then they go into this woke politics. You have all kinds of rules. Polygenderism, all this nonsense. One of the most evil things I can think of, a story the other day. The mother took her 4-year-old boy, and he says, well, I sort of like your old thing. So she took him to the doctor and had his surgery done. It's insane. And you say, well, wouldn't that be hard to prevent, because that would be choice? No, it has nothing to do with choice. It's closer to murder and destructive, because the child has to have protection, and who's having to protect him? The protector, did this to him. And the mother, though, in this case, she was remorseful and finally woke up to what was happening. But people have to wake up before those kind of things happen. And, there's this big thing in the system. There used to be, for about 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years, that most people knew that marriage was usually recognized between a man and a woman. They said, well, you can't be prejudiced. Now, a libertarian, from my viewpoint, is no. You can say you're married to anybody you want. You can do anything you want if you're of age. You just can't hurt people. And but where the crime comes is, what if people have 10 different definitions of marriage, and then they impose that on people that happen to believe that a man and a woman are married. So yes, you can be what you want and say what you want as long as you don't hurt people, but you don't have the right in the name of giving you, individual liberty to do what you want, that you can take away the liberty from the masses of the people, the majority of the people. It's just the opposite of protecting liberty. There are so many things that we are ingrained. So we have a job for ourselves, Chris, because people want to hear from it. I think they're getting tired of it. We saw that happen during COVID. People woke up, the parents saw it. So when you hear these horrible stories, we repeat them and tell them mainly to warn people, what's going on. And I think that we would like to think that we contribute to a more balanced effort here and what liberty really means.
I hope so too, Dr. Paul. I wanted to address fake rights. We see rights for this, rights for that. I mean, this is very basic stuff. You can't have a right, to scarce things or to scarce services, people's labor. Meaning you have a right to air, to breathe, because without it, you're not going to live. But you don't have a right to conditioned air conditioning, or heated air, because these require, savings, investment, capital, labor. So you don't have a right. But people will say, well, you don't want people to have air conditioning? What kind of person are you? Everyone has a right to air conditioning. No, you do not. You don't have a right to another person's labor. There's a word for that, for people who believe that they have a right to someone else's labor. You do, however, have a right to exchange. You can exchange an object for another object, or your labor for another person's labor. That's how society thrives and grows, through voluntary exchange. And both people can refuse the exchange. The other person does not have to deal with you. But at the same time, you have the same you have the same right to not deal with someone else. It's a shame that we have to explain this kind of stuff, because it's very, very basic. This is like stuff you teach to babies. But look how far we've drifted to people. They believe they have a right to whatever they desire, as long as a bunch of other people want it too, and they could get a majority or whatever. So, we have to get back to basics of just voluntary exchange, and you can't have the right to another person's labor.
Chris, this is a very good point. And I think early on I would get a little bit confused on it, because they talked about positive rights and negative rights. And it turns out that if you're a libertarian, you're for negative rights. Oh, what? How could you be that? Positive. But you pointed out so clearly, you can't come along and say, I have a right for this, and you have to take it from so-and-so and give it to me. And they say that's a positive right. No, it's nonsense. It's theft is what it is. But people sometimes will call this positive liberty, and negative liberty. I'm not for negative liberty, but negative liberty happens to be the most positive thing you have. That governments just remove the restraints. And the government can't do this, and it's up to you, and the responsibilities falls on people. So it's a trick that they play on you, that you guys are for negative liberty. Yes, in the sense that we want to be negative on the government interfering with our personal liberty and our livelihood and the whole works and association. So that to me is a big difference, because it's really what we're talking about is liberty, and they're going to lie about that for sure. And right now there's so many things that are artificial with this lying business, and they believe that you can have equity. Now that's a positive thing, isn't it? But the trouble is, it is impossible to get perfect equity, and you have to do it only with the sacrifice of liberty. But people paint this as, equity is very important, and you have to be fair with everybody, and you have to have equal opportunities and equal wealth distribution. When you look at all this stuff, it is so Marxist, so authoritarian, based on theft, based on violence. And then when you start applying that to two individuals or a local community or in a state or a country, then you apply it to a world event. So whoever is the kingpin, whoever has the reserve currency of the world and the most military power, all of a sudden that individual is making all these determinations. And that's why I resent so much our almost universal participation in coups. Right now, I believe we're suffering from the fact that our government has been removed by a coup, and the FBI, when the FBI and the CIA can murder presidents and control our elections, I'll tell you what, I always thought when I was in Washington that this is a facade. And I still believe that basically, because how would it end if you had a true election? How would you end up with some of the people who end up getting elected? So it's something that people have to realize, that there is a truth out there. It is not complicated. We can define it, and that the people who claim there isn't is just using that excuse to be the dictator.
Very good, Dr. Paul. I will finish up by saying, yeah, this cultural stuff that we're going through, it's really a tool. It's, and it's a very ancient tool called divide and rule, divide and conquer, for people in the government and people even above the government, deep state, people that are always there, that you don't elect, but they're there. And, so this cultural stuff keeps the people at each other's throats, where everything is politicized, everything. And when you're focusing on Republicans and Democrats and liberals, conservatives, and this and that, you are not focused on the people that are imposing this kind of stuff on you. Look at what happened with COVID. Crimes that are unimaginable. And look, are we just going to move on? But people are in their groups fighting amongst each other, and the ones that impose the policies or whatever, okay, we'll just move on. Why not? Nobody's going to do anything. So we're with this cultural battles, we're missing the people that are doing the real harm to us. And the antidote to this is obviously to get government out of our lives as much as possible. And think about the marketplace. Think about when you go to the store, you're dealing with people who may disagree with you on virtually everything, but you don't sit there and talk about it and debate about it and fight with them and boycott them. You just go, you make your exchange, and you leave. You could be sitting at a restaurant with people that have absolutely nothing, that if you actually had a conversation with them, it would disgust you, but you don't have to, and that's how the market brings peace to people with varying political beliefs, religious beliefs. It just doesn't enter the picture. You just deal with each other as people. That's the direction we need to go. And that means getting rid of, as much as possible, this idea of divide and rule.
Very good. There's a disease. Once they start on this and they establish a principle that people don't know how to take care of themselves, and it would be total chaos if they didn't have them, the elites, telling us what to do and how we should live. And but if you accept the principle that the elite have to tell people what to do because the people don't know what to do on their own, which is a falsehood. The people are much smarter about when we should go to war, except they don't speak out until they have a war, then they want to get out. But it's usually the people that finally end the wars. But I'd like to get it to the point, like right now, I'd like people to get to the point where they understand what's going on in Ukraine. Maybe we don't have to have 10 or 20 years of wars in the Middle East, or all the fighting and the killing in Vietnam and Korea and all these places. And it just has to do with a basic assumption of understanding. But if we accept the principles of the government getting involved in all these things, they're woke now, and we have to have equal justice. Well, first you have to start with education. Everybody has to have a perfectly equal education. And basically they're doing a pretty good job. It's very equally bad. A government school is not the best place to learn about freedom. I've claimed over the years that I went through the grade school, the high school, the medical school and all, and then when I discovered true liberty, the principles, I said, it took me a long time to unlearn the things that were pumped into my brain by these educational systems. Employment, if you have to have perfect equity in hiring people and firing people, then you have to become a racist to do that. So it just complicates things, but it enhances the people who love power. And just look how incestuous that became when people knew they could write executive orders. The presidents, everybody knew they could, and that became epidemic. But not everyone, but a lot of the governors say, hey, I can write executive orders too. So that became, very possible. In voting, I don't think anybody, is really confident. The people who are getting away with it, they sort of snicker under their breath. The people who are getting cheated, they can get canceled pretty fast. So I think the voting system, a lot of people have lost confidence in it. I don't have a whole lot of confidence. It's still a vehicle, and we still have to try to make it worse. And I think that is important. But one of my pet peeves on what happens once you accept those principles of wokeism is when you apply it to medicine. See, that really hurts, because the doctor-patient relationship is destroyed, and then you have the pharmaceuticals come in and they run the show, and the FDA and the pharmaceuticals come together. Corporatism runs the show on this. So then you have the pharmaceutical partnership going along with the military-industrial complex association. So that is why you want the government out of the business of doing business. And a lot of times people say, well, how are we going to solve this problem or this problem? And I first look, are they getting any money? It sounds like they're doing something half decent. Are they getting any taxpayers' money? Have they robbed somebody through their congressman and they got money? Then you shouldn't argue the details on how to run that program. You're supposed to get rid of it, and because you shouldn't have that. It's corporatism. Corporatism essentially always leads to the problem that we started off with, all this wokeism and this tool of saying equal justice is what we tell you justice is all about. So it's a philosophic thing. The government's been way too involved in the educational system. One of the reasons why I make at least a token effort to do my best in having a homeschooling group, the Ron Paul curriculum, because it is something that people are looking for. They certainly looked hard under the lockdown, but a lot of them would like to but can't do it for various reasons. But you can also overcome that shortcoming of our universities, just like there was a period of time in my life that I had to unlearn all the economics that I've been taught. And the history you can relearn there. It's out there, the books are out there. And if you have trouble finding any books, go to the Mises Institute. And so far, even with the encroachment on our First Amendments, there's still a lot of opportunity to spread our message. And I am a firm believer that in any message, in any idea whose time has come, the armies cannot stop those ideas. A lot of pain and suffering sometimes until we get rid of it. And we have to do it. But bad ideas, can't last. Good example is the Soviet system. It finally crumbled, and it crumbled from within. That was when we heard the statistic way back. The people in Russia don't believe a thing their government is telling them, and then all of a sudden you had Gorbachev come along and say, let's close the doors, But then it gets started up in a new area because there's a natural tendency. Good and evil is always working. But there's if you wanted to live in a bitter world, you have to recognize that and put your effort dealing with the ideas of liberty. And that is what we want to do here at the Liberty Report, is promote to the best of our ability to promote the cause of liberty. And we hope that you continue to support us for that effort. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.